A very warm welcome to you. It's great to have you with us on Full View on SABC News. It's Thursday. Every Thursday we bring you an extended discussion or a debate. It's time for On the Record, and tonight we look at the state of municipalities. It could be said that local government has been in disarray this year. Besides service delivery protests, many of them are drowning in debt. In the middle of the year, the total debt owed to Eskom was sitting at about 14 billion rand. Several municipalities have been placed under administration by provincial governments. One of them, Emfuleni, has been blamed for the fact that raw sewage continues to spill into the Vaal River System. And then there's VBS. Just this week, the ANC in Limpopo announced the suspension of municipal managers, a mayor, chief financial officers in several municipalities that invested money illegally with VBS Mutual Bank. 10 municipalities invested and seemingly lost about 1.2 billion rand. Well, the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, responsible for local government, he released an end-of-year statement today, and he joins us in studio now. Welcome to you, Minister.
Thank you very much.
So municipalities are really the face of government for people. That's where they get their services from. Can we start by saying that they are letting down South Africans woefully?
Well, let me say that they are going through challenges and the challenges vary. A lot of the challenges have got to do with the situation through which we're going. For example, a very poor economy with low growth means that they can't raise enough rates and taxes, and therefore they go through difficulties themselves. Then they've got high unemployment levels, they've got high levels of dissatisfactions, and so communities rise and complain because they expect more services, but then the economy is not able to support that. Then there are others which have got structural challenges that are designed in such a way that because they are in areas where there are small towns, small villages, their rate base is very poor, so we see them as being non-viable. Then, of course, the rest of the others have got a variety of problems. Amongst those, we're looking at the challenges that they face, issues of governance, issues of political tensions, issues of financial mismanagement, and issues of fraud, corruption, and all of these are a whole combination of issues that we have to deal with.
Can we just say challenges? I mean, look at Limpopo, what happened with VBS, Northwest. Whole provincial departments are under administration there, so municipalities just caught up in that. Looting, stealing, KwaZulu-Natal, people killing each other, and it turns out a lot of that is just for access to resources in municipalities.
Well, a lot of it is disappointing, to be honest. If you look at the issues of Limpopo, we're dealing there with an investment that should not have been done, and this is Limpopo and a few in Gauteng and in Northwest. And I'm glad that some action is being taken, because there has to be consequences here. When we started this issue, we did say that the thorough investigations are going to come and that action is going to be taken without fear, without favor, and I'm glad to see that that's actually taking place now. And you'll have noticed that from the point of view of the Reserve Bank, they went through a forensic report and it announced a number of individuals whose names were involved, and so we have to pursue them up to the point where we can recover as much of the money. Your report is talking about 1.2 billion. It's actually 1.6 billion. It's more.
I think 1.2 is Limpopo.
Well, Limpopo, yeah. Well, Limpopo is just about 1.1 billion. That's correct. So that is the issue. So I think that is one area. The second area which we have raised is the area of criminality, where we've seen irregularities in procurement processes. Then you see the attacks on councillors and some officials in municipalities. What we are glad about is that there's a lot of action from the South African police services. People are being arrested, so it's making clear that there are consequences for all of this. And with time, we're going to be able to get over on top of all of that.
Can you give me your perspective? Because you've been visiting municipalities. How do you deal with a problem like this? Say you look at it and there are people who shouldn't be in their positions en masse. How do you start dealing with something like that?
Well, the issues are straightforward for us. There are specific issues to look at. We look at the issues of governance, and then we we analyze the municipality. If we feel that they either have got people who are not qualified, or they've got bloated structures, they do have high vacancy levels and so on, we then institute an action on what needs to be done at that level. We look at the issues of financial recovery, their systems, are they working, and do they have proper complement and qualifications of the people who are in there. If they are not, together with Treasury, we institute a team that deals with that. When there's a problem of lack of capacity, engineering capacity, technical capacity for town planning, regional planning, and so on, we have in the past 4 months dispersed 80 engineers and town planners into all of these areas, and then we ensure that they act on investigations, they act on irregularities, and then we also engage the political leaders as leaders of the parties, as leaders of government, to say that the political issues that are causing difficulties need to be acted upon. And I think we're seeing a lot of action coming up.
To what extent is it a problem with skills and understanding? I mean, let's look at VBS Limpopo. So a whole lot of high-ranking officials moved out. Are there skills to move up and do the job?
Well, to be honest, the first thing we did when we found out about VBS, we wanted to know if the people who are involved were qualifications. Actually, you'll be surprised. Literally all of them highly qualified. So it's not an issue of people who walked up there with Standard 5 and started sending money to the wrong places. It's people who are properly qualified, municipal managers are well qualified, and those chief financial officers are well qualified. So we're dealing with people who knew exactly what they were doing. And so as far as we're concerned, we're keeping a very strict watch on the qualifications of individuals, especially the new employees. And we can actually object. If you have a municipal manager or senior executive in the municipality and we don't like their qualification, or we think that they are not suitable, we actually object. You can actually get the MEC to go to court and get a declaratory order to stop the appointment. So we're very strict on that. We're also strict on those who have got a history of misappropriation of funds, or those who have been charged, or those who have been disciplined before. If you jump before you are cleared, we'll now have a database. At the moment, it's close to 300 names, and we're checking everyone, and we've actually stopped 5 of those from being appointed on the basis of the fact that they were incriminated somewhere along the line. So we're actually trying to tighten up the system.
Yeah. This is interesting because you often don't hear of people being removed. Are they removed? VBS, that was the ANC withdrawing officials. But does government step in, I don't know, say when officials said, we owe Eskom a lot of money, but let's do a whole lot of other things? Are there any repercussions?
There are repercussions. Obviously, I think we can always talk about whether it's enough. In this case of the VBS, we had a process, and all the municipalities have acted. They've suspended the officials they think were involved. And then, of course, the political parties also started taking its own actions. So I think that's the kind of thing we want to see. When there's corruption, where there's a problem or irregularity, not only government must act, and the African National Congress or any other party must act on that side. And I think we're seeing quite a lot of that, which for me is progress. It actually takes us forward.
You're talking about progress. I think we spoke in March when an alarming stats came out. Only 7% of South Africa's municipalities are classified as well functioning. Then we looked at how many dysfunctional, close to dysfunctional, but only 7%. Do you think that's changed? How do we gauge that? What do we expect when those figures come out again next year?
Well, we identified 87 municipalities which we thought were most distressed, which were to take
Is that the 30% dysfunctional, basically?
That's 30% plus, because we're to put a number of factors together. For example, all those with VPS are in there, those who couldn't spend their MIC grant were in there, and those with financial challenges were in there. And so where we thought there was a need for intervention, we actually stepped in. So today we have actually removed 15 of those from that list. So we announced about 15 of them who no longer have to be seen as
they're out of ICU, basically.
Out of ICU, but we're watching still. But they're out of the ICU. We announced those. It's important also to be able to continuously evaluate and then ensure that we create a clear understanding that we will act at the time when we need to act on the various municipalities.
And taking those 15 out of ICU, was that difficult? Was that about people? Was that about systems? Was that about training?
It's a whole combination.
Can't you sort of say this is our main issue?
No, well, it's a combination. And a number of them, those which had a problem of expenditure on the MIC grants, we reinforced them when we got the technical team to support them. The others were to get them financial recovery plans, and the others were to deal with interventions on governance. But once we see there's progress, then we say, okay, then you can move on, because there are targets which they must meet. 40% of their MIC expenditure must be by December. And then if you pass that, then of course we'll leave you alone, and then we move on to the others.
So this was just financial support, really?
Well, it's a technical support, it's administrative support, it's a whole package of support.
Looking at VBS, I think you have tried to quantify, the money that will never come back. So taxpayers, everybody suffers because of that. Can you give us an idea of the real impact?
Well, look, the impact is quite varied as well, because we've gone to assess where they took the money from. And some of them took from equitable share, which meant that for the year that money is lost. The others took it from conditional grants, which meant again for the infrastructure that money is gone. Others took it from savings, others took it from funds that were due to be used in future years. And so all of this together meant that the impact will be varied. But what it will ultimately come to is a point where if you have the money in VBS and therefore you didn't spend it, you will come back, Treasury will ask you, you haven't spent so much money, and then give that money back, or if you don't, we'll roll it back to you. That's when the whole shows. And that's when we're going to be going through to see what other impact is coming through on all of them.
And does that mean more support from taxpayers ultimately?
Well, effectively, that means that we're going to have to see how we deal with that. We have not taken a decision to bail out anybody, because we have to work on a case-by-case basis. But apart from that, we still want to pursue those whose names are mentioned to actually try and recover as much as you can. It's a bit difficult to imagine that 2 billion could have just disappeared in South Africa and there's no trace. I think there's still some that can still be tracked back. But on the basis of planning, proper planning, we have to say that this needs to be recorded as money that's actually been impaired, and therefore there's got to be other plans made on how to deal with it.
You got caught up in this when it emerged that as Treasurer General of the ANC you had met with VBS. You've dealt with those claims. Do you think that is out of the way now? You said you didn't know about the funding coming in from VBS at that time for the party.
No. The first issue that was raised was that I was involved in in persuading municipalities to deposit money with VBS, and that is a lie. And we have to wait for those processes and deal with the matter at the time that it arises. So from where we sit, even that allegation was completely untrue.
Is there anything you regret, anything to learn here? And I'm just mentioning it because it's emerged that there's been a lot of meetings between the party and companies. Zweli Mkhize calling banks to Luthuli House. Are you and others thinking of ways that the party should engage with private business, who obviously gives money to the ANC sometimes? Is there any thinking here?
Look, firstly, there is nothing wrong with meeting any company and discussing, as we have been doing, because largely we discuss to find out what they do. We look at what they are doing in terms of transformation and advise them in terms of policy and so on. When they do that, we deal with it as our political responsibility as leadership, and there's nothing wrong with that. Secondly, we do go out to companies and ask them for donations, and when they offer donations to the ANC, those are completely non-transactional. There's no, you do this, so we do that for you. It's a clear thing, and everybody knows that party funding goes in that kind of way. So where we are very strict is that there shouldn't be issues of corruption. There shouldn't be issues of, action being done and then some pressure being put somewhere else for some of the decisions to be taken and so on. So that's the kind of thing that we have to deal with.
But it must be hard. It must be hard to keep those lines so clean like that.
Look, the issue is that this is politics, this is business, and they will always be working together. And I don't think we must create an impression that this is happening only in South Africa. Everywhere you have to interact with political leaders if you're a business. You know, when I was Treasurer General and you'd have senior CEOs, AP in BEV, come from all the way from Brazil to come and meet us. From BHP Billiton, from Australia, they'll come over here. You know, the big mining companies and so on, because what you learn when you interact is to always pick up the gaps between the policy that you have and the implementation, and we pick up those gaps, and they require that there must be a way of refining so that the economy must move without being affected by policy changes.
Before we finally move away from VBS, something I asked the ANC this week, and I'm speaking to you as a minister, but you are a member of this party. There was a lot of criticism that the ANC wasn't doing anything. Suddenly 7 municipal officials were withdrawn. That was a comprehensive action. It came at the same time as Ndani Mahlangu, other action taken in Gauteng. Is there a cleanup going on?
It's not a cleanup. When the reports come, we then deal with them on the basis and then act on the basis of the findings that come at that particular time. So if there's an allegation against an individual, you have to give them the possibility that it may not be that true, and therefore you investigate. Once the investigate gets to a point where it becomes very important that action must be taken, then we must deal with it. But it's not a cleanup. It's just that the ANC has to act as soon as there is information, adequate information that requires that there should be action. But there's been...
It seems stronger than usual, this sort of action.
Well, I don't think we must complain when we think this action is slow, and then when there's strong action, we complain either way.
I think it's good.
Well,
I'm just wondering if there's talk of corruption being dealt with much more comprehensively than it has been in the past.
That is without a doubt. Our last conference was very clear that the leadership that was elected must deal very decisively with issues of corruption, so that the ANC must be seen as the party that it is, and it's not associated with corruption simply because some individuals have been identified, but also there's not adequate action that has been that's been taken. So there's been a whole issue of strengthening on the Integrity Commission to make sure that they can intervene even in a situation where someone is not guilty, just to make sure that because the issue of corruption, fraud has to be dealt with, in this case we want to make sure that the ANC must be seen to always be acting. There'll always be allegations, but once you think that something is strong enough, something requires action, this is why I think you're seeing the ANC responding.
All right, back to municipalities. What is the situation right now in terms of that debt with Eskom?
Well, the debt is still rising. I think the latest figure is very close to 16 billion. And we have had an interministerial team that includes the Eskom, Water Board, the Ministers of Public Enterprises, Energy, COGTA, and Treasury, and so on. We sat together and we decided on a number of issues which must be dealt with. And so we've got recommendations that were accepted by Cabinet, which are about how to resolve the issue ultimately. So one of the issues, for example, is that the question of the constitutional mandate has been clarified, that it belongs to the municipality, so that must be managed together with Eskom with the sensitivity of ensuring that you don't disturb the flow of supply. Then the issues of NERSA licensing in all the areas, that again has to be dealt with. The issues of looking at new ways of collection, prepaid metering, showing that there's evidence that it's more efficient than conventional metering, and also looking at possibilities of third-party collectors who will actually help the processes without putting undue strain.
Where is it heading to? Could municipalities be left out and then Eskom just starts doing the prepaid meters so everybody gets fairly and squarely billed for what they use?
No, there's a relationship here. You know, the bulk of the revenue that comes from to the municipalities come from electricity reticulation. So there's a relationship that needs to be rebuilt so that the municipalities can still supply, but at the same time, there must be, we must ensure that Eskom gets repaid for whatever they would have sold at that level. But we must then make sure that the whole of government deals with defaulters, deal with them very thoroughly in terms of individuals who might have been at fault, so there must be consequences to them, disciplinary action, resignation, people must be acted upon, and then the statutory interventions where and the next layer of government must intervene in terms of the constitution or provincial or national. So all of this we want to mobilize into a complex package that will make sure that there's never a need for Eskom to take anybody to court. Government responds and acts on everybody before that need arises.
It has been complicated because I understand there are different circumstances. Some municipalities are making an effort to pay back. Some have not made the same effort. Some businesses are being cut off to their detriment when they paid. Have you been personally involved in that complicated balance?
We have had to deal with a number of those. In some instances, you find that the municipalities have received payment, but they don't pass it on to Eskom. In some instances, they pass as much as they could, but the debt is so much because it keeps compounding, and we've had to deal with all of those kinds of instances. But we sat down in some of the municipalities with business. We've agreed that there must be an arrangement where we go back to fixing those municipalities, ensure that their revenue generation is improved, their financial management is improved, and look at how we can collaborate in returning the municipality to normality and all of this. So all of these things are going to be, it's not just one shotgun approach. It's a combination and a package of activities where everyone must take responsibility.
If you look at Eskom now, a lot of people are looking at the fact that maintenance issues are coming back to haunt Eskom suddenly. Vaal Sewerage, another example, and looking there, only 30% of the pumps apparently were functional in that municipality in Emfuleni. That's when the raw sewage started spilling in. I mean, how did it get that bad in the first place?
Well, let me just say there are 2 or 3 things that would have happened there. In the first instance, the pressure between expanding new services to new communities which were excluded meant that it actually took quite a bit from what was used for maintenance. And as a result, this imbalance meant that there was an overflow in the numbers of households that were connected as compared to the maintenance program. And then these two together, without a planning that brings in increased capacity, is causing that problem. In everywhere you go, it's either poor maintenance, it's new households that have been connected, and then it's a lack of expansion of the existing services. But when you look at it, you realize that some of the municipalities have had to take choices. Do you build houses, or you go and build a sewage plant? Because everywhere, everybody is under pressure. So it's a whole combination of those issues.
So how do you get your priorities right so this doesn't happen again?
Well, the way to do it now, we have actually, you might have recalled, the president spoke about a stimulus package, and in there he spoke about infrastructure fund. Now what we're doing, we want to look at the gap between the backlog and the current budgetary allocation. We want to pull in private sector to invest in that gap and find ways of ensuring that with improved revenue generation, we can actually crowd in private sector funding. In some instances where, for example, we've got poorer municipalities, we can take money that was due over the next 5-6 years, crowd it together and focus on one big project, and then we can get banks to come in and so on and so on. So public-private partnership is going to be one way that's going to help us to deal with this. We basically are saying that the backlog is offering opportunities for investment, and the recovery of municipalities is helping us to be able to say there is a way to repay those debts, so the municipality, the private sector does not feel threatened that maybe there will be default again. Government is fully into that whole program.
In the meantime, at what point do you get personally involved? Because looking at this, the fact is raw sewage is still spilling, the SANDF is there now, but for a while it felt like there was just this blame game, no immediate solution to something that seemed very big and very serious.
Well, I suppose every now and again it will appear like there's a blame game, but in reality, a lot of assessment has to be done before you take a decision as to who you bring in, and a lot of calculations has to be brought into so that you can identify, do we have the money? Is it there in this current budget? How much can be done on the existing allocation? How much do we need to crowd into this whole operation? Can the private sector trust that this is a viable municipality? What do we do to we build the municipality to a level where its revenue generation can reassure those who are investing that enough will be done here and that their monies will be safe? So it's a whole combination of things. But once we turn it around, you will see things will change.
Well, in finality, I mean, you've said that we need to create a culture of payment when it comes to Eskom and those sorts of issues. You've also said that there are many highly skilled people doing the wrong thing. So how do you create that culture of payment and a culture of ethics in our municipalities?
Well, two things. Firstly, the jobs must go to properly qualified individuals. Two, for every transgression there must be consequences. And if you tie on those together, you'll actually be able to see a huge change.
All right, thank you for your time this evening, Minister Zweli Mkhize, Minister of Cooperative Governance.
Thank you.